Here is chapter 11 of Someone Was Watching. Chris woke up feeling heroic. He didn't know why. Maybe it helped that it was dark. He couldn't see that he still had the same kid-sized body, that he was still only 13 years old, but he knew that if a hero was needed, he was going to have to be that hero. There was a need. Molly was alive and alone in a faraway town, and there was only one person who believed it, who knew where she was and was willing to go after her. Him. And maybe Pat. He had to talk to Pat. He looked at his clock, 4:23. Too early to call anyone, but he was wide awake now, his mind racing down dark paths. He switched on his lamp, walked to the desk, and pulled a volume of the encyclopedia set from the shelf. He opened it to Florida. A map showed cities and counties, lakes and rivers, highways and roads. It took him a while, but he finally spotted New Moon Bay. Westview was just north of it. Using the scale on the map and a ruler, he figured the distance at about 30 miles. 30 miles of western Florida coastline. The nearest big city was probably Tampa, 100 miles or so to the south of Westview. He pulled another book from the shelf and opened it to United States. The U.S. map was familiar, but he'd never really figured distances between states before. As he picked up his ruler, something clicked against his window. He half-turned in the chair and looked, but his shade was pulled down. Nothing there. An early morning breeze through the partially open window nudged the shade into the frame. A quiet click. He turned back to the desk. Another click, louder, not the wind. He walked to the window, pushed the shade a crack open, and looked outside. Down on the front lawn, ready to throw a small twig, was Pat. Chris raised the shade and stuck his head out the window. "Pat, what are you doing?" he whispered loudly. "I couldn't sleep. I saw your light come on. Let me in the back door. I've got to talk to you." Chris slipped quietly downstairs and then tiptoed back up with Pat on his heels. The house was dark and still and cool. Chris closed his door quietly behind them and sat down in his desk chair. Pat leaned against the desk and pulled a wrinkled piece of paper from his pocket. "I did some calling after I got home last night," Pat said. "Did you find a shrink for me?" "I don't think you're crazy, Chris. I was calling the airlines." "Going somewhere?" "Look, I'm sorry I wasn't more help last night, but it was pretty much all over by the time I got there. Your parents weren't about to listen to me." "I know. I'm sorry. I'm just upset that they didn't believe us, not even a little." "Maybe they're afraid," Pat said. "Aren't you?" "Yeah. Anyway, after I left last night, I figured that we're the only ones Molly has left to help her, so we need to do something." Chris had to smile. He could see Pat getting wound up. He'd started pacing around the room. "So you called the airlines?" "Yeah, about 10 of them. I didn't know which ones went where, but I finally got the information we needed." He handed Chris the paper. "You mean you want to go with me to Florida? You really do believe she's alive?" "No, I just figured I'd blow $420 on a trip to Westview to humor a crazy friend." "What?" Chris said. "It costs that much? Do you even have $420? He pulled open the desk drawer, searching for his bank book, but it was hidden somewhere in the debris. "In my bank account. More than that, actually." "Me too," Chris said. He'd been sticking money in there since he was a little kid. "Can you get it out without your parents okay?" Pat asked. "I have before," Chris said. "You?" He got up and walked to his door, listening for his parents, but there was no sound from their room. "Yeah," Pat said. "So you were already planning on going?" "I decided this morning when I woke up." "Alone?" Pat's face suddenly dropped in the soft light from the desk lamp. "I was going to call you. I didn't know if you'd want to go. We're definitely going to get in trouble with our parents." Chris sat down on the corner of his bed. "Not if we find Molly." The thought shot through Chris like a lightning bolt. His hair felt as if it were electrified, standing on end. He ran his hand through it, expecting to see sparks. He got up and wandered around the room, studying the piece of paper Pat had given him. Pat stopped pacing and watched him crisscross the rug aimlessly. "Remember when Molly started calling me Patty and I told you I didn't like it?" "Yeah," Chris said. "I never told her to stop," Pat said. "Why?" "I liked it. I want her to call me Patty again." Chris suddenly wondered what it would be like not to have Pat for a friend. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "Look at those encyclopedias on the desk, Pat," he said. Pat glanced at the open books. I already looked at my atlas, he said. That's how I knew what airport we'd fly into. It's Tampa. Chris didn't respond. He sat down on the edge of the bed, still staring at the paper. Finally, he looked up at Pat. I don't think we should go today or tomorrow, he said. Why not? My parents are going to be on the alert after yesterday. They may not let me out of the house, and you won't be any better off if your folks get told. But after a couple of days, they'll probably think we gave up on the whole idea. He stared at the wall. And we've still got to get our money, buy the tickets, and make our plans. That's going to take a little time. I guess you're right. I don't think Clover and Bud are going anywhere. Chris looked at the paper again. You've got a Central Express flight showing here that leaves at 9:30 a.m. Is that every day? All of them are daily. That looks like a good one. We'd be able to leave for the airport after our parents go to work and still get there in time to catch the plane. You think they'll let us get on by ourselves? Pat said, or even sell us the tickets? Chris hadn't thought about that, about being too young. He just figured if they had the money, they could go. But now he wasn't so sure. I don't know, he said. We'll have to try it and see. He wasn't going to let any silly airline regulations wreck their plans. If he and Pat had to, they'd ride the bus all the way to Florida. Right, Pat said. What about coming back? When do we schedule the return flight? If we don't get round-trip tickets up here, it costs a lot more. More than $420, Chris said. Maybe they should take the bus. But that would take time, possibly enough time for his parents to track them down and stop them. The plane had to be their first choice. We could probably come back Monday or Tuesday, he said. That should do it, but there's no way we can know for sure. He thought a moment, rubbing his eyes. If we find her, we'll have to go to the police down there. If they have police. Every place has police. Even Westview? Even Westview. But what kind of police? Chris wasn't sure. He had an image of a fat guy with a flat-brimmed hat and sunglasses who called everyone boy. But they'd have to worry about the police later. So what do we do now? Pat asked. Chris glanced at the clock. You're going to have to leave. My dad will be up soon for his morning run. By 8 o'clock, they'll both be gone to work, and your parents will be out of your house, too. Come back then. To make plans? Right, Chris said, walking to the bedroom door with Pat. Neither of them spoke on the way downstairs. Chris opened the back door silently and let Pat out into the cool morning air. The sky was brightening in the east. Pat, Chris whispered as Pat started for home. Pat turned around. Chris could just make out his features in the early dawn's dim light. A smile had spread across his face. He looked excited, glowing, reflecting Chris's own feelings. Yeah? He whispered. Thanks for coming, Chris said, and slipped back inside.